October 18, 1976. Frank Sinatra was 11 minutes into what should have been a friendly interview when Johnny Carson asked a question that made the chairman of the board's face go cold. "Frank, there are rumors you might retire. Any truth to that?" Sinatra's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed, and without saying a word, he stood up, unclipped his microphone, and walked off the Tonight Show stage in the middle of a live taping. The audience gasped. Ed McMahon froze. Doc Severinsen stopped conducting mid-note. And Johnny Carson sat there for 10 seconds, an eternity on television, trying to process what had just happened. Then Johnny did something he'd never done before. He stood up, looked at the camera, and said, "We'll be right back." And he walked off his own stage to follow Frank Sinatra into the hallway. What happened in that corridor over the next 4 minutes, captured by a handheld camera that wasn't supposed to be rolling, became one of the most raw, unscripted human moments in Tonight Show history. It was a Monday night at NBC Studio One in Burbank. The air carried that electric anticipation that came whenever Frank Sinatra was scheduled. Frank didn't do many talk shows anymore. He was 60 years old, semi-retired from regular performing, selective about his appearances. But Frank and Johnny had history. They'd known each other since the early 60s. Frank had been a guest multiple times. They had mutual respect and easy chemistry. Tonight's booking had been planned for weeks. Frank was promoting a charity concert at Caesar's Palace. The pre-interview had gone smoothly. Light topics, funny stories, nothing controversial. Everything was going perfectly. The monologue killed. The audience was hot. When Ed McMahon announced Frank Sinatra, the applause was thunderous, the kind of applause reserved for legends. Frank walked out in a perfectly tailored suit, waving to the crowd, that famous Sinatra smile in place. He shook Johnny's hand, sat down. They started talking. The first 10 minutes were classic Tonight Show gold. Frank told stories about recording with Count Basie. Johnny made jokes about Frank's reputation with women. Frank laughed, Johnny laughed, the audience ate it up. Then Johnny asked the question, "Frank, there are rumors floating around that you might retire. Any truth to that?" It seemed innocent enough, a softball question. An opening for Frank to talk about his future plans, maybe plug the charity concert. But Johnny didn't know something critical. Frank Sinatra had just been through one of the worst years of his life. Multiple personal and professional blows that had left him raw. His mother's death earlier that year, marriage struggles, IRS investigations, and relentless press coverage calling him washed up, past his prime, ready to retire. Frank hated those stories, hated the implication that he was finished. And now here was Johnny Carson, his friend Johnny, asking about retirement on national television. Frank's smile disappeared. His eyes went cold. "What kind of question is that?" Frank said, his voice low and dangerous. Johnny's face showed confusion. "Frank, I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean what? You didn't mean to suggest I'm finished? That I'm too old? That I should pack it in?" The audience went silent. This wasn't banter anymore. This was real tension. "Frank, that's not what I was saying." "Then what were you saying, Johnny?" Frank's voice was rising now. "Because it sounds like you're buying into the same garbage the papers have been printing for months." Johnny held up his hands. "Frank, I'm sorry if I offended you. That wasn't my intention." But Frank was already standing up. He reached down and unclipped his lavalier microphone. The sound technician tried to help, but Frank waved him off angrily. "I don't need this," Frank said. And then Frank Sinatra, one of the biggest stars in the world, walked off the Tonight Show stage in the middle of a live taping. The audience gasped. A few people started whispering. Most sat in stunned silence. Ed McMahon stood up from his desk, mouth open, not knowing what to do. Doc Severinsen held up his hand, stopping the band mid-note. Johnny sat at his desk, frozen. 10 seconds passed. An eternity on live television. Then Johnny made a decision. He stood up, looked directly at the camera, and said 5 words. "We'll be right back." And Johnny Carson walked off his own stage. Before we go deeper into what happened in that hallway, The conversation that wasn't supposed to be recorded, the moment when two legends stopped performing and started being human. If you're here because you remember when Johnny Carson chose friendship over television, subscribe to Johnny Carson Legacy Stories. We're uncovering the moments when the cameras caught what they weren't supposed to see. Hit that bell. Johnny walked quickly toward the stage exit where Frank had disappeared. Fred de Cordova, the show's producer, caught up with him. "Johnny, we're in commercial. We've got 3 minutes." "I don't care," Johnny said. "Get the backup guest ready. I'm not coming back until I talk to Frank." "Johnny." "Fred, I just humiliated Frank Sinatra on national television. I'm not letting him leave like this." Johnny pushed through the door into the backstage corridor. Frank was standing about 20 feet away, back turned, shoulders tense. "Frank," Johnny called out. Frank didn't turn around. "Leave me alone, Johnny." "I'm not leaving you alone, not like this." "I said leave me alone." Johnny walked closer. "Frank, I'm sorry. That question, it was stupid. It was thoughtless. I didn't know about everything you've been dealing with." "You didn't know?" Frank spun around, his face red. "Everyone knows, Johnny. The press has been crucifying me for months. And then you of all people, ask me if I'm ready to retire?" His voice broke. "I thought we were friends." What neither of them knew was that a young camera operator named Michael Chen, who'd been filming backstage B-roll earlier, still had his camera running. NBC often kept handheld cameras rolling backstage for technical emergencies and backup footage. Michael was positioned in the hallway, hidden around a corner, and his camera was capturing everything. Michael knew he should turn it off. This was private. This wasn't for broadcast. But something told him to keep rolling. Johnny's voice was quiet now. "We are friends, Frank. That's why I'm out here instead of in there trying to save my show." "Your show," Frank said bitterly. "It's always about the show, isn't it?" "No," Johnny said firmly. "It's not about the show. It's about you. It's about the fact that I hurt you and I need to make it right." Frank was quiet. "I didn't know things were that bad," Johnny said softly. "And I'm sorry. I'm sorry I asked that question. I'm sorry I made you feel like I was piling on. That's the last thing I wanted." Frank's shoulders sagged slightly. "Do you know what it's like," Frank said, his voice thick, "to be told your whole life that you're the best, and then one day you wake up and the world decides you're finished?" "No," Johnny admitted. "I don't, but I can imagine it's terrifying." "It's not terrifying," Frank said. "It's humiliating. It makes you feel like everything you built, everything you accomplished, means nothing." Johnny stepped closer. "Frank, look at me." Frank turned. "Everything you built means everything," Johnny said. "You're Frank Sinatra. You're not going anywhere. One bad year doesn't erase 50 years of greatness." Frank's eyes were wet. "Then why did you ask that question?" "Because I'm an idiot," Johnny said. "Because I was following a script instead of paying attention to my friend. Because I failed you." He paused. "And I'm sorry." Frank stared at Johnny for a long moment. Then something in his face softened. "You really didn't know about everything?" "I swear to God I didn't," Johnny said. "If I had known, I never would have touched that subject." Frank nodded slowly. He wiped his eyes, trying to compose himself. "I overreacted," Frank said quietly. "The question, it wasn't that bad. I'm raw right now. Everything feels like an attack." "You didn't overreact," Johnny said. "I stepped on a wound I didn't know was there. That's on me." Fred de Cordova appeared at the end of the hallway. "Johnny, we've got 1 minute." Johnny ignored him. He kept his eyes on Frank. "What do you want to do?" Johnny asked. "You want to leave? That's fine. I'll make up some excuse. Blame it on me." Frank shook his head. "No, that's not fair to you." "I don't care about fair." "I do," Frank said. He took a breath. "Give me 30 seconds to pull myself together. Then we go back out there." "Frank, you don't have to." "Yes, I do," Frank said. "Because if I walk off your show, that's the story. Sinatra storms off Carson. and I'm tired of being the story for the wrong reasons." He straightened his jacket, wiped his face one more time. "Besides," Frank said, a hint of his old smile returning, "I'm Frank Sinatra. I don't walk off shows. Shows walk off me." Johnny laughed, a real laugh. "There he is." If you're feeling what just happened, the moment when ego died and friendship survived, you're exactly where we want you. Subscribe now. They walked back onto the stage together. The audience, which had been sitting in confused silence, erupted into applause when they saw Frank and Johnny return side by side. Frank took his seat. Johnny sat at his desk. "Ladies and gentlemen," Johnny said, "we had a little disagreement. Frank got upset. I got upset. We worked it out, because that's what adults do." He looked at Frank. "And because Frank Sinatra is twice the man I'll ever be, he came back to finish the interview." Frank smiled. "Johnny asked me if I was retiring, and I got sensitive about it because I've been dealing with some personal stuff lately." His voice caught slightly. "It's been a hard year, and when people ask about retiring, it feels like they're saying I'm finished, and I'm not ready to be finished." The audience was completely silent now. "But Johnny didn't know all that," Frank continued. "He asked an honest question, and I reacted badly. So I'm sorry, Johnny, and I'm sorry to everyone watching that I walked off." He looked at the camera. "But I'm back now, because Johnny Carson is a good man, and good men deserve second chances." Johnny's eyes were wet. "Frank, you don't owe anyone an apology." "Yes, I do," Frank said, "and now it's done. So ask me something else, something that won't make me storm off this time." The audience laughed, grateful for the release of tension. Johnny smiled. "Okay, tell us about the charity concert at Caesar's Palace." And for the next 15 minutes, they had one of the best interviews of Frank's career. Funny, warm, honest. When the show ended, Frank hugged Johnny. Not a showbiz hug, a real hug. "Thank you," Frank whispered, "for coming after me." "Always," Johnny whispered back. The hallway footage, Michael Chen's handheld camera, wasn't supposed to air, but Fred DeCordova kept it, locked it in the NBC archives. Years later, after both Johnny and Frank had died, NBC aired a special about the Tonight Show's most memorable moments. They included that hallway conversation. America watched Johnny Carson chase Frank Sinatra into a corridor. Watch two legends argue. Watch them reconcile. Watch them be human. The footage went viral before viral was even a word, because people had never seen anything like it. Two of the biggest stars in the world having a real fight and a real reconciliation, captured by a camera that wasn't supposed to be rolling. Frank Sinatra never retired. He performed for another 18 years until 1995. He died in 1998. At his memorial service, Johnny Carson spoke. "Frank and I had a fight once," Johnny said, "on my show, in front of millions of people. He walked off. I chased him, and we worked it out." Johnny paused, emotion thick in his voice. That's who Frank was. He got angry. He got hurt. He walked away. But if you came after him, if you showed him you cared, he came back. Always. October 18, 1976. Frank Sinatra walked off the Tonight Show stage. And Johnny Carson did something unprecedented. He walked off his own show to bring Frank back. Not because television mattered more than friendship, but because friendship mattered more than television. And that's the moment that defined both of them. If this story reminded you what real friendship looks like, keep this channel close. There are more moments like this. Moments when Johnny Carson chose people over performance. Comment below, would you have chased him too? Because on October 18, 1976, Johnny Carson proved that some things are more important than the show. And Frank Sinatra proved that even legends need friends.